Good afternoon and welcome to ARC's webinar series. I'm Amelia Larson and I serve as the EVP of Innovations and Academic Partnerships at American Reading Company. ARC is an organization founded by and run by educators in pursuit of love, literacy, and liberty. Our work is designed to create the types of schools where all students are served well and thrive. We draw specific attention to the needs of students from historically marginalized and underserved groups by creating a sense of belonging and safety and engaging them in high levels of literacy work that honors their intellect, their culture, and their communities. A few housekeeping items. We have ASL interpreters with us today, and closed captioning has been enabled for those who would like a live transcript. We are recording today's session and hope to share it with all of you in the near future. You will receive an email in a few days with resources from this webinar, as well as information about our past webinars this year, so you can take a look at what you have missed or watch it again. We have had an incredible lineup. I do encourage you to join the conversation through the chat feature. And if you have questions, continue to post them in the chat. We will try to address them as we go. I would like to welcome our hosts and esteemed board members. Dr. Pedro Nogueira is the Emory Stoops and Joyce King Stoops Dean of the USC Rossier School of Education. And prior to this, he served as the Distinguished Professor of Education at the Graduate School of Education and Information Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles. A sociologist, Dr. Nogueira's research focuses on the ways in which schools are influenced by social and economic conditions, as well as by demographic trends in local, regional, and global contexts. He's an author and co-author and editor of 15 books. Dr. Irvin Scott joined the faculty of Harvard Graduate School of Education in 2016 after 5 years working as the Deputy Director of K-12 Education at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and 20 years working as a teacher, principal, assistant superintendent, and chief academic officer. Dr. Scott is currently working on an initiative that looks at the intersection of faith and education in school. One of the goals of the initiative is to enable educators to safely stay in touch with their full identities as they do their work on behalf of schools and communities. We are so lucky to have you as our hosts. And I also now want to introduce to you our esteemed partners and panelists today. We have Andrea Gilbertson, principal at Shoshone Elementary out of Wyoming. We also have Bruce Thoren, superintendent of Fremont. We have Madeline Diamond, director of language programs in pre-K-12 from Peekskill, and Dr. Rebecca Avalos Rodriguez, assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, also in Peekskill. We have Candace Kelly, District Literacy Instructional Specialist from Smyrna School District, David Morrison, Supervisor of Instruction from Smyrna School District, Heather Moyer, Principal at Clayton Elementary School, also from Smyrna School District, and last but not least, we have Tyrone Brooks, Assistant Superintendent, South Washington County Schools, and Arthur Williams, Director of Teaching and Learning, Elementaries, also from Southwest County Schools. We are so excited to have you. We have representation from across the country, across sizes, across types of implementations. You will have so much to learn today. So as I transition to our hosts, I do want to make sure that we set the tone for today. These leaders are here today to share their experiences in leading through adversity. The pandemic exacerbated economic and racial educational inequality. The impact continues to be felt. And I don't know if you read this article a couple of weeks ago on the New York Times, but a recent survey conducted by an important group demonstrated that around 90% of parents that responded to the survey thought their child had already or would soon catch up. To them, the pandemic effects was just transitory. And we know we are living this every day. And we are so excited that you are willing to share your experiences, your challenges, and yet keeping your focus on the right work. We cannot wait to hear from you. And with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Pedro Nogueira.
Thank you, Amelia, and good afternoon from Los Angeles. Hope that everyone is well. Looking forward to this conversation. Myself and my colleague, Dr. Irvin Scott, will serve as facilitators. So let me start out by building up on what Amelia just laid out. The learning loss issue is a real challenge academically facing districts, and many districts are trying to find ways to help their students catch it up, accelerate learning. At the same time, it's not the only challenge. Many of our schools are faced with enormous mental health challenges among students and in some cases among adults as well, and grappling with how to address both of these simultaneously. And then there's the politics out there, there's safety concerns, there are parents making demands about what should be taught. It's a huge challenge for educators now to chart a course that allows us to meet the needs of kids and continue to move forward. And so we want to hear from you and how you're doing that. How are you getting the staff of your school to work together on a strategy that will meet the needs of your students? So I see Tyrone Brookins, Doctor.
You are on mute.
Muted.
Can't believe I'm still making those mistakes. Please send me some grace.
We understand.
Thank you all for taking time to come and join this webinar. And it is I would say, a very applicable topic to discuss. In response to the question, in response to navigating that tension between the daily expectations and then talking about accelerated learning, I come back to a quote from Margaret Wheatley. She says, in organizations, real power and energy is generated through relationships. The patterns of relationships and the capacities to form them are more important than tasks. They're more important than functions. They're more important than roles and positions. So in South Washington County Schools, we are working to make sure that we leverage those relationships to not only bring on a new curriculum resource in all of our elementary schools, and actually it was 14 of our 16 elementary schools. And coming off of and out of the pandemic, we recognize that we're going to need that foundation of those relationships to move forward. I have a colleague here, Arthur Williams, who was actually transitioning into his new role of Director of Teaching and Learning from being an elementary principal. And he had that instant credibility with those leaders, so that as we onboarded our launching of the American Reading Company resource, he had the tacit knowledge, the grounded knowledge, and he learned the expertise of working with the ARC leaders in a way that it was going to be conducive for our leaders to take it to their teachers and bring their teachers on board. So the foundational piece there was leveraging the relationships.
Well, thank you for that. Anybody else want to chime in about? I see Bruce Thorne from Wyoming. Bruce.
Thank you. One of the things that, as much as you try, you can't get more of is time. Time is an invaluable asset. And in looking at this curriculum and looking at the benefits to being able to address that learning loss and being able to address those deficits, that is one thing we look very hard at this curriculum with. Our teachers dug into it. They looked at it, and they brought it to me. And I had them bring it to our school board, quite honestly, and present it to the school board. So we had a very grassroots initiative into this. But from the time perspective of this, to get people on board, to get people trained, to get people good at things, you got to have time. And to get time, you got to take it from somewhere else. And so as we move forward with this process, the books that come with the art curriculum allowed us to minimize instruction in social sciences and some of those other areas that they were getting through reading the passages in these books. And further that cause, we jumped in and participated in a research brief, because still looking at that time and looking at the end result, we wanted to make sure what we are doing is going to have an impact on our high stakes summative assessment that compares us to everybody else in Wyoming. And through that research brief, we basically ended up with a 0.758 coefficient relationship in testing those kids with the IRLA versus how they're going to perform in the Y-top. So that was very important to our district, that ability to look at the commitment of time to the American reading curriculum and where we're going to save time. And so through those efforts.
If I could just offer a follow-up, and either you or David, who has had could chime in. One of the things that struck me about the article on learning loss that was in the New York Times that they mentioned is the fact that parents a lot of times don't know and don't understand the degree to which their students are behind. How are you communicating that information to your community so that the parents are also part of the strategy?
David, do you want to take that, or Andrea?
No, Bruce, my comment was going to piggyback on yours a little bit, but
I threw a wrinkle in there, so
it's okay. I see Dr. Aviles Rodriguez has her hand up as well, but if I could just quickly, Pedro, one of your original questions was, how are you moving instruction forward yet not ignoring the elephant in the room of the learning loss? And that's one thing that I shared with a group last week, and that is through American Reading Company's, strategic IRLA framework, and then you layer our core on top, that's where students are getting on grade level, standards-based instruction every single day through core, yet every single day they're getting that individualized or small group instruction, filling gaps with what IRLA provides. I couldn't, we are an art district, but I can't agree more with what Bruce said about, it's people, not programs, and those relationships that you build. Interestingly, the two colleagues that I have here with me today, both were in transition phases mid rollout, where Mrs. Kelly was transitioning from classroom teacher who made the transition with the rollout into a district reading specialist, and Heather Moyer was making a transition from a building reading specialist to an administrator. So again, building on that credibility that Bruce mentioned. So we find some success there. And with our partnership, the coaching that comes along with it, you're creating reading specialists throughout your building with the IRLA framework and the science of reading. So we have found success that way. Success came longer than we would have liked, but success came just the same.
That's good to hear. And Madeline, and more on that question of buy-in, how are you approaching that in Peekskill?
So I want to just go back to your question about the article and the families, because my understanding is how we're communicating with the families. And I think that in Peekskill, we have done a really great job with capitalizing on the parent home updates that come with the core curriculum, right? We are very adamant about sharing that type of data at parent-teacher conferences. We send them out several times a year. And then if parents have individual type of questions, that they reach out to the teachers or Dr. Aviles or myself. But I think for what comes with the ARC, we also do newsletters. We have created resources for parents through QR codes where they can front load the vocabulary for the year of the units from September all the way through the end of the school year. So for us, it's really been a matter of giving the families access on their level, right? Even skills cards, we looked at the skills cards. Is it easy for parents to interpret that? If it is, then let's share out the skills cards for them through QR codes. But the home update is just a piece that I feel like that comes with ARC Core that has been critical in us being able to bridge that communication with the families and with how their children are doing and having real honest conversations. Having real honest conversations with parents about the levels and what that means and how it pertains to grade levels. And some parents may say, well, they've been on white for the whole year, but that's because it's conducive to that grade level. So it's not necessarily something negative. They're just trying to target these specific skills. And Dr. Aviles, I don't know if there's something you want to add to the family component that we've done.
Yeah, to that end, Dr. Noguera, I think you make a really great point in terms of asking about how we're supporting parents because parents just don't know. And I think that that's a great entry point to understand the beauty of the way that the ARC continuum is structured, right? Because it actually allows us to be able to really comprehensively understand the entry point of the child, right? And actually gauge the movement along complex text that the child actually takes. And support the parents in understanding that and being able to celebrate that. I think that is the distinct departure between ARC in terms of the way that it's structured and other traditional assessments like FMP. We need to be able to gauge where our children are right now, celebrate where they are, and provide them the supports to allow them to continually move, right? And provide parents with a really comprehensive understanding of that. And just to come back to that end about the home updates, that comment about the home updates, I think that the way that ARC has structured those home updates allows districts to have a really good way of just, again, comprehensively and simply communicating with parents on a regular basis. And it takes a layer of pressure off of the school districts in tandem with all the other things that we have to communicate to parents. I think that a lot of what we do is relational based, going back to the point that Dr. Brookins made, that leadership matters in this, and leadership, again, laced with a good foundation in relationship to reach out to the community and help them understand this very complex journey of learning how to read. And so I think that the way that ARC has overall structured its programming, it allows districts the liberty to really be able to get to the nitty-gritty of being able to engage the parent and to provide them the supports that they need to be able to understand the journey that their children are taking in reading.
Thank you. Maybe take Andrea, and then we'll pass the baton to Irvin.
You bet. So very quickly, I just wanted to loop back around in regards to the learning loss question that was posed. In our district, we have 45 minutes a day with an MTSS block paired with our work with the IRLA and the ARC toolkits. And it really, really has been so instrumental in addressing learning gaps. We're really able to give students the instruction that they need on that day. We regroup kids with similar needs. We're able to really individualize instruction every day. And I see in the chat, Amelia had said in there about informing the students where they are. And so the Power Goals really provide that opportunity for every child. It's just been very pivotal in our ability to grow our students and especially addressing those learning gaps. So, and then just, I would be remiss without mentioning the coaching piece that ARC has provided. That has been tremendous in ensuring that we have the skill set to provide what's necessary for our kids. So it's been a great team effort.
Excellent. This has been phenomenal. And Candace, I'm glad your hand is up because I was going to come to a couple of the Smyrna individuals with this question. And you can add to what you're going to say now. But what I'd like to do is just step back a second, because what I do know is that we have individuals, participants from across the country who are not doing ARC now. They are here in this call because they're trying to decide, should we go with ARC? I heard someone mention Fontes and Pinnell. So there are other curricula out there. There are these conversations around the science of reading that are really intense across the country. They've even they've actually gotten to sort of national media. So it's not just in the education world. They're talking about it on NBC, or they're talking about it on NPR. And so what I'd love for anyone who wants, and Candace, if you want to jump in here, but you can do something, you can talk about what you're going to talk about the process of deciding that we're going with ARC, right? You were at some point in time, might take you back 3 years ago, may take you back 5 years ago, may take some of you back just a year. What did that process look like for you, and how did you decide to land where you are and then build the infrastructure to support it? Candace, you want to take that on? Then we'll go to Dr. Aviles or others.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I appreciate that. I do just want to piggyback really quick on what Andrea was just talking about as well, with the consistency that happens across buildings within ARC Core and IRLA, within grade levels, then stretching from grade levels to within buildings, and really maximizing the collaboration across our buildings and across grade levels. But that also it like happens with the students. It's involving the students in that common language and understanding all that. So it's interesting that that was your next question, and I had my hand up, so I'll be really brief here. I was a classroom teacher at the time that we decided to pilot, and we started with IRLA, and our district took the rollout to really get familiar with IRLA first and take that time to dig in and get to know our students and where their reading growth could really take them. And I really feel like that maximized our approach to joining and bridging to ARC Core. So I would love to hear how other districts also saw that. But as a classroom teacher building into that, it was an amazing experience to be able to spend that time in IRLA first and bridge to that tier 1 instruction.
Thank you, Candace. I actually think that's a really powerful way to think about how work gets started. Do we start at sort of a central office level, and maybe people from central office can talk about what it looks like from a central office perspective? But what Candace does a nice job of is giving us a picture of what the work looks like for a teacher on the ground, which we all know is the most important place for all of this work to manifest itself. So different entry points. We just heard from a teacher. Dr. Aviles, feel free to jump in.
Sure. I love that question, Dr. Scott, about how we went about processing and making the decision to jump over to ARC. And I think that one of the most resonant components of our decision making was really the way the power goals are structured in terms of the language that ARC provides to really delineate and distinguish the reading characteristics and behaviors that are necessitated at each level to empower teachers to be able to, again, comprehensively evaluate their students in tandem with the conferring schedule. I mean, all of us are educators. We understand that the best way to be able to learn and gauge where students are is to talk with them, to listen to them as readers, right? To get a sense of how they're processing text. And so for us as an administrative team, when Madeline and I and the superintendent and our team went to visit and see ARC in action, that's exactly what we found to be most impressive, right? The ability that teachers now had the language to be able, in the framework, to be able to look at their students and be able to label and have the language to, again, support their students in selecting goals. And then in tandem with that, now children are articulating their goals. How powerful is that? A child is actually able to articulate their goal and how they're moving through text and what their next steps are going to be. So again, the elements of student voice and student empowerment and actually delivering a process, a mechanism for them to be self-empowered, right? And so for us, I think that was the one quintessential element of this that really kind of put us over the top, because quite frankly, teachers have a lot on their plate, right? And they need to be given really good tools to be able to do their jobs and to do it well. And I think that giving them a framework, a web-based tool that allows them to, again, have the language of the power goal, be able to come back and see the trajectory of learning from a data perspective, right? And then allowing other leaders. So Madeline looks at that data on a regular basis. Our superintendent is looking at it on a regular basis. Other district leaders are looking at it. And I think I would be remiss if I did not really distinguish that as a really serious point in this process, because leadership matters. And so it's a different thing to tell teachers that this is something that works and is good for them to do, as opposed to partnering with them and being in the mix and looking at the data and making recommendations alongside with them and being in the classrooms and observing. And I think that that's something that anyone who is considering ARC, I think they really need to look at their leadership structure comprehensively and honestly, right? To see what the level of commitment is going to be, because this is a journey that has to be walked side by side. It's not one that can be done in isolation in order for it to be successful.
Wonderful.
Can I just add something to that,
Yeah.
Dr. Scott, to Dr. Aviles is piggybacking on that, because there's one important point that was also very critical for us to bring ARC in addition to everything she just mentioned. For us, we were looking for a unicorn of a program for dual language. We wanted authentic Spanish literature written by top-notch authors. And that was critical because we did not want teacher translated materials. My Spanish is going to be different than another Spanish speaking person's Spanish. So the fact that the ARC core is available in Spanish for those that have bilingual programs, and it's not translated word for word, it's fluid, it's authentic, that was huge for us to be able to bring that to our dual language scholars. So I just wanted to add that because it was another bonus and selling point for us when we were looking at the program.
That's really important. Top-notch authors. I was going to ask Amelia to shout out some of the author names who actually sit on the board with Pedro and I, who are a part of our board, who write curricula, who write books. You don't have to do that, Amelia, but yeah, Alma.
I'll post it.
Oh, awesome. That's a really important point. Thank you so much.
Can I chime in? Because there was a great question from Melanie Stoltz-Bacchus in the chat. Mm-hmm. She poses the question about depth versus quickness of covering material. And one of the challenges here is that in our desire to catch up, we may prioritize quickness over depth of understanding. And what we often see when students get to college is the depth of the analysis, their ability to utilize a broad range of literacy skills. For example, to identify what's a good source, to identify how to develop arguments using a text, have not really been developed sufficiently. So I'm wondering, how are you grappling with that depth versus quickness of coverage?
Excellent question. Let me get Arthur and Heather real quick, and then we'll take up if that's okay, Pedro, then we'll take up this question around depth. Yes, go ahead, Arthur.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to share the process that we at South Washington County Schools went through to select ARC Core. We go through a CIRC process, which means Standards and Instruction Review Cycle, where it's a team of administrators, teachers, instructional coaches. We form a team. We had 3 different reading companies present their material to us, and we have this very extensive rubric that we use when evaluating curricula. So for example, we look at equity, our cultural responsiveness, our rings of culture included. We want to make sure that students see themselves in the text. We look at the PD, and many of you touched on that and just how important the ARC training and PD that comes along with it. And then we also look at the formative and summative assessments that come along with it. And so after looking at 3 presentations, we decided on ARC Core, and it has been so great this year. As Dr. Brookins shared at the beginning, I transitioned to this role being a building principal. And one of the things I've noticed is just the excitement and the engagement that kids have with ARC Core because of the reading and the writing piece. I just attended a book publishing party for 2nd grade at one of our elementary schools on bugs, and they were just super excited. And it's so fun to see them light up and share their writing that they have. So it's been just fun partnering with ARC.
Thank you, Arthur. I don't know, but you know how we do in education, we steal other people's ideas. But if you have access to that rubric and can share, I love the idea of an intentional rubric to decide what we're going to do around curriculum, as opposed to people's gut instinct, or this is what Miss Johnson really likes, or this is what the CAO likes. Bring some rigor to it. Heather, last point, and then we're going to get to this question Pedro has posed around depth versus breadth.
Hi, good afternoon. So I have a very different perspective since I was transitioning from one position to another. And our district had implemented the IRLA program first, like Ms. Kelly had said, and it was piloted at one of the schools. And some of the presentations that they had presented to us were phenomenal to create the buy-in from all of us, because we could see the growth, we could see the data. It was showing such progress in the students at that school. So then when I transitioned to the elementary school where it was already in place, of course, COVID hit. So we had to pivot and recreate how we were going to work IRLA and core and all of that. And so since then, it's fully implemented. But again, we've had to change over time. And it's been very, very rewarding because there's so much support with the program through the coaching, through all of the materials and resources that they give us. I feel like our teachers are extremely supportive. And just having the data and the way we always are giving shout outs data digs, I think that they have all the buy-in and just want to implement it with fidelity and integrity so that they can fully get the feel for the growth that the students are accomplishing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Heather. Amelia put in the chat, don't outrun your coverage. Go slow to go fast. Great point. So Pedro's question, depth versus breadth. And it actually was posed on the chat, I think.
Yeah, it was posed on the chat, and I think it's a great challenge. Andrea, were you ready to respond to that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
I actually was going to respond to a different question. So it was also in the chat, but if someone else would like to respond to this one on the table, that's completely fine. So I'll just defer to anyone else that's willing to visit with.
Yeah, there was a related question about this depth versus breadth, about some teachers preferring things like open court with clear pacing guides, and another person saying, look, we got to teach to the standards, but how do we teach to the standards if the kids aren't there? All of this gets at meeting the needs of kids where they are and making sure that we're really preparing them and not just following a formula, which is what some people might feel more comfortable with.
I'll share that. I think that that's the beauty of ARC, I think, in helping us with that particular challenge, because it honors the point of entry of the child. And I don't think we can get away from that. We need to keep coming back to that, because quite often in education, we're looking at a standards base, right, a grade level performance, and our kids deserve better than that. Honestly, we need to honor who they are. And so I think that when you look, I don't think we need necessarily to exchange one for the other. I think if you know where a child is functioning, you can deliver all those things. You can deliver rigor and depth and breadth and fun and beautiful literature, all in tandem. And I think, again, that depends on the tools that you have that allow you the ability to look at the whole child. And so that would be my argument. And I think that here in Peekskill, we do a really good job, again, with the coaches in terms of really looking and diving deep into these beautifully laid out units of study to, again, be able to differentiate as best as we can for our students. But that is supported by the data that we have that highlights where our kids are coming in and how quickly, right, they're moving along levels. That's really incredibly important data, right, in order to be able to inform ourselves as to how we should be structuring units of study to continue to enrich our students and provide them the rigorous landscape of education that they need to be able to be 21st century learners. So I would argue that I'm not going to exchange one for the other.
All right. Heather, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, so I think the balance, I think the ARC core and IRLA is a really great balance of the high level thinking with the ARC core and then the individualized instruction through the IRLA. I really think that teachers know their students much better with the IRLA because it's very individualized. They're doing the conferencing, they're getting down to look at their needs. Sometimes it's a need for intervention, sometimes it's a need for acceleration, but then they also have the on grade level core curriculum as well. So I really, and then you have the toolkits. The toolkits also lend themselves to the intervention. So I think that's where the depth comes in because we're really diving deep into the education of all students.
Very good. Arthur, Minnesota.
Yep. And to piggyback off of what Heather is saying, prior to this, I, taught 3rd and 5th grade. And as a 3rd and 5th grade teacher, I didn't really have the skills to teach phonics to older students. So it's been great seeing our intermediate teachers use the IRLA to be able to teach specific phonics skills to those older kids that really need it. So that's been really great to see as well.
Andrea?
Sure. So I just wanted to chime in. We've talked quite a little bit about the reading side. I just want to visit a minute just about the writing and the impressive writing that our students have been able to turn out, largely because of what you're referring to, Dr. Noguera, with the depth of knowledge that they gain. And our students, actually, this is a moment to brag, and I'm going to take a minute to do this, and it's largely because of the support we've had through ARC, but our students competed in the Wyoming State's Young Authors Competition recently, and in the nonfiction division, because of the research units and the depth of knowledge that our students have, they become experts. And we actually had 25% of kids that were given awards in those categories in nonfiction just from our school. And again, I give it completely up to ARC for the tremendous job that they do in their curriculum to support not only the reading, which we've talked a lot about, but the depth of knowledge that comes through in the writing is absolutely phenomenal. So we're super proud of that. And again, just appreciate the partnership that that ARC has provided to get us to that point and having tremendous readers and writers. So
that's really good to hear. But it's important to think about literacy in a comprehensive way, right? That's one of the things that concerns me when we talk about the science of reading. What about writing? What about media? All these, what about debate and speech? So thinking about literacy in a comprehensive way, I think is really important. Anybody else want to just comment on the implementation with teachers? And because often that's where good plans fall apart, right? If the teachers don't embrace it, don't make it their own, don't become decision makers who know how to respond to student needs, sometimes we see good plans fall apart. So Marilyn?
I'm going to do 50-50 because I want Dr. Aviles to also chime in because I think we were super strategic about how we launched it in Peekskill and really proud of how well the implementation worked out. So we did bring ARC in initially for dual language. And we are a Princeton model. So we have K1 school 2, 3, 4, 5. And it was during COVID. The superintendent was like, we're doing this September 2021, right? So what we did was we launched it in the entry grade per each building. So it would be kindergarten, 2nd grade, and 4th grade. Again, just in dual language. So what happened with that is then the teachers started talking to each other and went from, oh my God, so many resources to, oh my God, this is amazing, right? So by year 2, when the other dual language teachers were getting ready for implementation, there was already this excitement about it. So dual language was full blown by year 2. They were planting the seeds. And then Dr. Aviles, if you want to talk about the early adopters. So it was very strategic. It was staggered, but it's been very successful.
Yes. So Madeline's correct. There was an immediate excitement with the resources and how well the units were actually planned out and complement one another in reading and writing. In tandem with that, again, we have a very large dual language population, but our general ed teachers quickly began to raise their hand and say, hey, what about me? I want these resources. And so it began to kind of spiral from there. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the high level of professionalism that the coaches bring to this process. And they bring to the job embedded coaching and to the support and the nurturing and the care. I really have to give a shout out to the company for that, because the coaches have been incredibly nurturing. They establish personal relationships with the teachers. They really try to, again, partner with them, get to know them, and give them, very personalized type of support. And so we have been very fortunate that both Rebecca Elias and Lawrence Ramos, the coaches that we have had, have been amazing. And so we quickly then spiraled into, okay, we're going to go full blown. We then in tandem adopted literacy coaches that shadow the art coaches. And so they have become, ARC rock stars, architects, as Madeline coined the phrase. So we have had amazing success with a culture that, again, and I just have to say this from a stance of servant leadership, of really wanting to serve our kids. We feel really, really gratified that we found a resource that honors our kids, that is culturally responsive, and that honors and showcases all voices, all walks of life. And so that has been really the scope of the joy of our implementation. But I think that we've had to make the strategic moves, and those strategic moves were the job embedded coaching, the additional PD days because we were virtual, right? And then adding additional days for those coaches to be here in person, and then adding coaches into our culture so that they could support and sustain the work that ARC has helped us lay out. So at this point we're just waiting for the next evolution of growth. We're very excited.
Dr. Brookins, back to Minnesota.
Yeah, but if I could piggyback off what was just said around the implementation, it's building that teacher capacity. I read a book years ago by Dr. Ross Green, and he was the name of the book is Lost in School. And he had a principle in that book that says, kids do well if they can, or kids do well if they want to. It's like, well, everybody wants to do well if they can. How do we do well? When we equip with the proper resources, the proper support, and the proper training. When we went with American Reading Company, ART, we got the full package. And so we had professional support for our principals, monthly check-ins with them, meetings where we reviewed data, we set goals, we created action plans, and then we visited classrooms to see if what we planned and what we talked about is actually being in action. And then we have a group called reading specialists or literacy coaches. That was monthly PD for that group of educators that support the schools. And then we had the art coaches come in and work directly with our classroom teachers. And we had that also on a monthly basis. And that was that involved the coaches coming in, having discussions, actually doing demonstration lessons, doing small group instruction, doing assessments. Teachers could ask questions. And so we built their capacity to employ this resource at a high level. And now we're starting to utilize the IRLA system to look at how do we progress monitor and how do we improve our results beyond the implementation from the coaching. And so it's an exciting time in the district, but it started off with how do we build the capacity so that our teachers can be successful? Who owns the learning? We want our students to own the learning, and that happens when we make sure that our teachers have the resources and support to be successful.
And I think, Andrea, did you have a question, a comment before? No? Your hand was up.
You know what? I can just save it for the last check-in. I think we'll make the round here. Amelia's ready to make the rounds, and we can share out.
We have time.
Okay. I was just going to again piggyback on what was shared in regards to implementation, and specifically around our experience as a team shifting to a high quality curricula that's aligned to science of reading. It was a very big shift in our district. We went from a scripted basal curriculum to American Reading Company. So we really used the phrase be comfortable being uncomfortable. It was a paradigm shift for us. And although there were challenges, again, as many people have spoke to, the art coaches were there and they were extremely instrumental in our shift through the process. I think one of the things that I truly was most passionate and excited about was really seeing our teachers come back with a fire for teaching. It really reignited their interest in teaching with the ARC frameworks. They had so much more just autonomy in their instruction, the ability to meet their students where they were at, and really even their love for the unit topics we've seen. They've just really fallen in love with teaching again. So in regard to science of reading, the power of the IRLA, providing students with exactly what they need in their learning, and especially in those foundational skills areas. But it's been tremendous, just a cornerstone for our district's reading success.
And who was the most uncomfortable as you did?
Right here, the hand is raised. Yeah. So thank you.
And I think it's important because based on what Bruce said earlier, they have the data to show that their investment is paying off for all kids. So that when you're getting results, then it's easier to maintain the consensus, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're getting ready to do sort of a round robin around what was left unsaid, or what do you want to just make sure we get out there in front of everyone. But before we do that, I don't want people to, and Andrea began to allude to this a little bit, and Pedro sort of set it up with this question. I don't think any of us want to send the impression that things are perfect or that it was all perfect. And so maybe before we do the round robin, anyone want to say what's your next level of work? Like we've got to figure this out. Like we're doing well, we're doing great, but to be honest, we got to figure this out. And so to just make sure that people understand you're leading real schools and real district with real challenges. Yeah, jump in, Arthur.
One of the things we've done in South Washington County is we've looked at the book Implementing Change, and there's the 12-13 change principles. So Dr. Brookins and I have been really intentional on working with our principals on specific change principles, because we all know there are those laggards out there that I'm not changing anything because I've done this for X number of years. So really helping build the capacity of our leaders to help make that change, because we know as a system, we're not going to change until every single person in the system has changed. So really focusing on those people that are just sticking their feet in the mud and saying, I'm not moving. So really building our leaders' capacity around that.
So important. That is a really good example. Make no mistake about it. It's not like 100% of everybody is like, let's get this done. And we've got to be really transparent about that. Thank you, Arthur. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, very quickly. Thinking about our next steps now, here in Smyrna, we are by and large in our fourth year, and as we approach year 5, that's when, so we're past implementation. Now we're talking about sustaining, and this is the time of year. I don't care whether it's math or ELA or social studies. Now teachers think it's time to start tweaking a little bit. Well, we can do so, maintaining that fidelity. Not that there's not things to build upon. And we just had a district ELA literacy meeting this morning. And as part of kind of the send-off survey that I asked about building on that leadership group for next year, it was wonderful to talk about the things we continue to learn and the things we continue to improve upon. So there is no finish line. So we're going to just keep, learning from one another, sharing the good news, sharing the obstacles, and working through it together. So our next thing is that sustainability piece.
Thank you so much, David. Just because we've been able to get it done and start it doesn't mean we will be able to sustain it. And so how do we check ourselves around that? Excellent point. Okay, Amelia, I think we're getting close to the round robin of asking if anything has not been said yet.
Yeah. What is something that you really want participants to hear from you before they go? And I'm going to ask one person from each district. And then if we have more time, we can add more people.
And someone just asked Arthur, maybe put the book in the chat that you referenced, Arthur, about implementation.
Implementing change. Yep.
Implementing change. Yep. It's called Implementing Change.
So who wants to kick us off?
It looks like David's ready.
Go ahead, David. Thank you.
Yeah. So that hand was still up from the last time, but there's no reason why I can't kick us off. That's great. It's been an enjoyable 49 minutes, and I just appreciate listening to the power in the room. But to the folks on the call who maybe you're looking into ARC, or maybe you're going to kick it off next year, we have shared some successes that we're very proud of. make no mistake that it was hard work, and it continues to be hard work, but it's good work. So, there's a lot of talk about leadership, and, we're leading what is right and not what is easy. So, it's good work. It's necessary work. It has forced us to rethink some of our systems and structures. First and foremost, we took a hard look right in the midst of a pandemic. We implement HQIM, and why don't we change our grading structure at the exact same time? Perfect timing, right? But, it has helped us grow, and we continue to grow. So just commit to the hard work, keep doing the hard work, surround yourself with good people. And that's all I got.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, David. Dr. Avalos?
I would say, I just want to echo what David said. We're not doing what's easy, we're doing what's right. And I think that's so good. And that really needs to be, I think, the core message that I think resonates with all of us and anyone that's watching, that we need to do what's right for our kids. And so you're right, Dr. Scott, it has not been all a bed of roses. It is definitely hard work. There were many bumps along the road, but my advice would be, just make sure that the core leadership is all on the same page and grounded and invested and moving forward every day, little by little by little. This is a system that you chip away at. It's not going to be a whirlwind of change all at once. It just doesn't work that way. So if the leadership is invested and you're ready to, again, look at data and walk side by side with your teachers, this is not white tower work. This is boots on the ground work. And then the last piece I would say is that be faithful to it. Please be faithful to it. Our kids deserve that. Our families and our communities, they deserve that. And so if you have a core leadership that is, again, invested and ready to be faithful to the call of delivering good literacy instruction to their communities, then you're going to be successful. It's not going to be easy all the time, but you are going to be successful. You're going to bear that fruit at some point, because this is not a one-season harvest. You have to stick to it, and you must be faithful to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Arthur, want to jump in there?
Yeah, Dr. Brookins, please feel free to jump in. But one of the things that I would say that's been left unsaid is when you think of what ARC can bring to a district, I look at the through line, right? It's so powerful when our teachers, as many of you said, people that are boots on the ground, when an assistant superintendent or the director of teaching and learning or another district person can come in and do a quick levels check or just be able to do what the teachers are doing, that speaks power. I mean, our superintendent attends meetings. And so for them to see, our leader invested in these meetings and being able to go into schools and do the things that they're doing, that's very, very powerful.
Additionally, at the core foundation, literacy matters. Literacy matters. If you want to close the achievement gap, eliminate an opportunity gap, you got to make sure that you have literate students. And with that as the driving force for us in South Washington County, it's like we got to create a sense of urgency. And so when I talked about that support that came with ARC, when those coaches were coming, when Lacey was coming, when Lisa are coming to our district to work with principals, they were pushing our principals to make to a degree where they were uncomfortable. It's like, whoa, who are they to come in and tell us how to do this and how to do that? Well, let's look at your data, and that's why they're here. The data is not matching up with what's being produced. So I'm okay with, principals sitting in a little bit of discomfort if it's going to yield the result of literate students. As we push students up to the middle school, we want to make sure that they arrive at their middle school with confidence and competence from a literacy standpoint. That's reading and writing.
Can I just add self-advocacy too? There's nothing more powerful than the students self-advocating for themselves and being excited about where they are and where they're going and what they need to do to get there. I mean, once you have students doing that, I feel like, mic drop, we are in a great place for students to be self-advocating.
Yeah, I would just say, I often say that what's a sign of a good education? Kids want more education. They start reading independently. You don't have to make them do things. they internalize it. And so I'm so happy to hear several of you talking about empowered learners as being, one of the outcomes of this work, and hopefully also empowered teachers who are better able to make decisions in support of their students. So this is really encouraging.
I think we have one more district to share. Fremont?
Sure, no problem. I'll jump in. I think it's been said several times, but I do think the level of commitment really matters, and that's across the board, from the leadership to the teachers, to the families, to the students. And what I will say is that if you make the commitment, I really absolutely believe, I think it's going to be impossible not to fall in love with ARC. We have been through a lot with them. This is our, I believe, 5th year of implementation here, and they will be there to support you if you're on the fence again, but we'll be there to support you through every step of the way. The coaching, just at a moment's notice for whatever the need is, they're always there. So that's one piece. I also just add in that if you have an opportunity to go to a school where you would be able to observe and view ARC in action, I'm going to tell you that's how we ultimately made the decision, is we were able to see it live. And some of the sessions are called, believing is seeing is believing, and it really made a difference for us. So if you're on the fence and you have an opportunity to go observe ARC and see what is happening, you're going to see reading, you're going to see writing, you're going to see just some amazing things that you're going to want to be a part of. So I'd highly encourage that if you have the opportunity.
To jump in on top of Aunt Andrea here, one of the coolest intrinsic things that I saw walking down the hallways, instead of seeing this with kids in the corners, books were open. Kids were sitting there in the hallways reading books. Wow. Huge.
Thank you so much for this incredible time together. And I want to turn to our hosts. What are the takeaways that you want people to remember?
I'll just jump in real quick. I'm just going to play back some of the things that you've said already. Literacy matters. Just straight to the point. Literacy matters. And this is a way of showing that literacy matters by implementing high quality curriculum. It's not easy, tremendously important. I really appreciate the candidness around the challenges, the next level of work that you have to move forward. Someone said boots on the ground for everyone, including leadership. I remember being a principal and how important it was for me to show up in professional development that I was requiring everyone to go to. What does it look like for me to require professional development? I'm sitting in my office getting emails done, right? And so what I'm hearing is the importance of having leadership also participate on the ground around the implementation. I love the language around the power goals, the conferring schedule, and communicating to parents, just brilliant. And I love the fact that you're speaking from your personal experiences as you move this work forward. Great job, everyone. Thank you so much. Pedro, over to you.
The only thing I would add there is leadership matters. And we've heard from leaders today about how they've been building capacity among their staff to do this work. Because I think that's what often policymakers don't understand. They set goals, they are willing to criticize you when the test scores don't rise, but they don't understand the hard work of getting a teacher to switch into a new curriculum, getting kids off their devices and into books. That's not easy work. And what we've been hearing from these districts is that's the work you're in. And it's a process. It's not an event. It just doesn't happen automatically. But over and over again, I heard today about the importance of sticking with it and implementing with fidelity. And I think those are themes that anyone listening should take away as being really important.
I'm not as important as Pedro and Irvin, but I'm also going to leave a takeaway with you. We have been talking a lot about the science of reading. And sometimes when the media is so focused on one aspect, people are tempted to just address that aspect. I think today you heard that no one denies the importance of foundational skills in making sure students learn how to read. But I hope you heard here the importance of growing knowledge of the world, expanding vocabulary, helping kids marshal evidence from texts and communicate it when they are speaking, when they are writing it. and deepening their understanding through more and more complex texts. This is the whole package. You can't choose just one part because the ship will sink if you do that. So keep up. It's hard work. You heard it here. It's the right work. Thank you so much. And I hope you join us in July when we kick off next year's webinar series. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful job, leaders, district,
Very inspiring.
system level leader. Wonderful job. Thank you.